Hello, hello. Welcome back to Loki's Librarian. I am your librarian, Katrina. If you are new here, welcome. This is where I am reading through the enormous library books you see behind me, and then I give you a quick synopsis and I tell you what I think about them. So if you like books, just aren't sure what to read next, hit that subscribe button, like and share my videos. Let me know what you think in the comments. This week's book joined my library a few years ago when I quite belatedly, unfortunately, discovered who Walter E. Williams is, or was. He died in 2020. And because I am always keen to learn more about economics and in general, and he is one of the premier economists of the 20th, 21st centuries, this week's book is More Liberty Means Less Government. Our founders knew this well, by Walter E. Williams. And because I added topical cocktails a few months ago, this week's cocktail is called the Swindle. Because that's all government does. It swindles us out of our money using a positively Byzantine tax code that should not exist. So let's do this. We do start with 1 ounce Cointreau. I am not quite sure what I was expecting when I started reading this book, but what I got was essentially a reprint of several of Walter Williams' weekly columns in a book format, broken down by category. So they're not chronologically how they were published in the papers. They're more grouped by section. The essays, I think, were all written between 1995 and 1997, which is weird because they're still incredibly topical to today. And the categories, he broke it down into 7 categories, each tackling a specific issue from different angles. The categories are race and sex, government, education, environment and health, international, law and society, and potpourri. Sounds like Jeopardy categories. What does Williams have to say on each of these topics? Let's take these in turn. All this is getting poured into a ice shaker. We're going to shake it over ice. For some reason, I seem to be doing a lot of shaken drinks. That's where we're at. First up was race and sex. Now, I'm a little embarrassed by how in the dark I was on these topics in the 1990s. They're still relevant today. They're still being talked about and bludgeoned to death in the media and by politicians everywhere. But they were, for some bizarre reason, probably because I was a self-absorbed teenager in the 90s, I wasn't really paying attention. I was not aware that these were issues back then. I was a teenager. Teenagers are self-absorbed little assholes. I was one of them. I should know. Basically, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And Williams has nothing but contempt for the leftist policies. And those are his words, leftist policies that keep breaking down society, specifically wreaking havoc with minorities and women. And he calls out race hustlers who preach profit demagoguery, basically that the economically ignorant stance that governments care more for people than individuals care for people, which is provably false by basically any metric you care to put out there. 2 ounces of Mezcal is my next Mezcal. I have Luminaire, because that's what I bought a few weeks ago for one of my other cocktails. Okay, 2 ounces of Mezcal. So, he points out the fallacious belief that somehow white people have a leg up in society, pointing out that up until the war on poverty, which did so very much destroy black families, this is a direct quote, as far back as 1969, black males who grew up in homes where there were magazines, books, and library cards had incomes identical to whites from similar homes and educations. Basically, if you want to fix income inequality, how about making sure that the people can actually read? And not just can read, but do read. And you don't force them to read. You can't force them. I read because I love to read, because that's the example that was set for me in my home. My parents are both readers. You want your kids to read, you need to read. Live by example. Demonstrate this to them. Show them that a lot can be learned. It doesn't have to be nonfiction. You can learn a lot from fiction. Sometimes there's very well-researched historical fiction, but not even that. I'm talking you can learn about human empathy from fiction. You can learn that that hero's arc that Joseph Campbell made so famous is well known for a reason, and that's because that human story is so very real. And it was embodied perfectly with J.K. Rowling. That's why the Harry Potter books were and are so immensely popular, because it catches all those archetypes and runs us through that cycle endlessly and to a perfect conclusion. That's what you can learn from reading. Fiction, nonfiction, whatever. But if you read, you're more likely to do well in life. As to sex, or in the 21st century parlance, gender, he points out the absolute fallacy of quote-unquote gender norming in the military. This seems to really enrage him, and he uses several examples that even I had heard about back then about women pilots who were trying to be fighter pilots and failing, sometimes with spectacularly detrimental effects, as in they died in a training accident. And that was part of that failing of the quote-unquote gender norming, because they would make fatal errors that on a male pilot trainee would have gotten them booted out of the program, but they were allowed to pass on because they were female, and that's detrimental to everybody. It's detrimental to morale, because now the men are aware that no matter what they do, some woman can bypass them even if they can't do the job as well. That's horrifying. I mean, good God, ladies, think about the hypocrisy of that. How pissed are you if some guy gets a promotion that you wanted even though you're eminently more qualified, right? I mean, lawsuits are based on that, but it's okay for us to sue a company for that sort of discrimination, but God forbid a man do it when it's a woman who's in. He's just labeled categorically as a sexist, even though that may not be the case. You may have literally gotten a position that you were unqualified for based on your gender, and that's bullshit. And understand, he is not actually saying that women can't do these jobs. He is saying that if they're going to do them, they must be qualified at the exact same level as a man, or else we become weaker as a nation. Militarily, certainly, but not just militarily. We suffer as a nation by insisting that this equals this. They are not the same, not at all, okay? And he's just pointing out that fallacy. I gotta pull my recipe back up here, sorry. 3/4 of an ounce of fresh lime juice. Now, I have a fresh lime. Hope to God I can get enough lime juice out of it, because if I can't, I gotta run downstairs and grab my, fake lime juice. 3/4 of an ounce. It's a good thing I'm cleaning my office today. You may or may not notice the stacks of books behind me. I'm reorganizing some of my shelves. Close enough. Since I don't know what it's supposed to taste like, I won't know if I'm doing it wrong. 1/4 ounce of fresh lemon juice. Okay. This next topic, government. Government is force. That is the short summation of this chapter. Government is force. That's all it can do. All government can do is coerce us. But moreover, he explains in detail that government, at least our government, is extremely limited in what they're allowed to do. We the people have forgotten this because they don't teach us the Constitution anymore. You have to actually go out, find it, and read it. But the government is limited. The U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, they are profoundly limited in what they are allowed to do legally, except for when we the people put on our blinders and ignore what they're doing and don't insist that they just stick to their enumerated powers. And this whole section was dedicated to highlighting the ways in which Congress has violated its mandate, and incidentally showing how it violates repeatedly that one lesson that we learned last month from Henry Hazlitt. The art of economics consists in looking not merely at the immediate, but at the longer effects of any act or policy. It consists in tracing the consequences of that policy not merely for one group, but for all groups. They don't care for all groups. They care for whatever group is currently lining their pocket. That's all Congress cares about. And yes, whatever your preferred Congress critter is, they're the exact same. They are just as corrupt as everybody. I need a 1/2 ounce of orange juice. I like this one because I could find a small thing of orange juice. I didn't have to buy a huge ass thing of orange juice. That was it. I think I just shake it all up. Shake. Ah! Okay, the copper shaker is really freaking cold. Pour it over ice. Okie doke. So, all Congress can do is violate that policy again and again. That one lesson. Because they don't give a shit about the lesson. They give a shit about getting elected and getting reelected. That's all they care about. They don't care about you and me. And they will accept money from anybody who can help them achieve goals 1 and 2. Get elected, get reelected. And for some bizarre reason, we the people keep expecting them to be seen to do something. Doesn't matter if what they're doing is actually effective and works. They must be seen to be doing something. And we all suffer for it. It's okay. It's not too bad. It's citrusy, obviously. It's got lemon, lime, and orange juice, but it's not bad. Okay. And since we think they need to be seen to be doing something, they take that, they being Congress, take that as permission to violate the Constitution on a daily basis. And we let them, because rather than holding them accountable for the massive failure that is Congress, We just keep reelecting them under this bizarre thought that it's not my Congress guy who's the problem. Totally just hit my mic. It's not my Congress guy that's the problem. It's the other guy. It's not Amadei, it's Pelosi. No, it's all of them, because they all do this. They all accept these bribes from corporations. I think the real job of the IRS should be to audit Congress yearly. Every member of Congress should get an audit. Anyways, still so full. Definitely tart. Education. I mean, a field day with the topic of education. He had a section for it, but this comes up frequently in other essays as well. The absolute failure of the American education system. And yes, he points out that there's a huge problem with schools that are in specifically black areas. Sure, he was a black guy. Why wouldn't that hit his radar hard? Okay? But he also points out that schools for quote-unquote white people are no picnic and success either. We are basically failing on an international level at everything. I don't specifically remember him mentioning charter schools in this book, but he does mention how private schools and school choice are particularly beneficial. They give people the option to go somewhere better and learn more. He also mentions the massive failing of affirmative action laws in getting black students accepted to various universities. Now, again, he is not saying that black students should not be at schools like UC Berkeley and Harvard. He's saying that insisting that a student who only achieves an 800 on the SATs be admitted to a school where the average SAT score is 1200, for example, virtually guarantees that 800 level student is going to fail because they're not up to par with their peers. So instead of having them go to a state school or maybe even a community college to start, they're jumping right into these universities and then failing out of universities where they might have passed at the local school, at the state school. How is that beneficial? Having them just fail out of college? That's so much better than having them go to a school that's more at their academic level of understanding. Not just black people, incidentally. This goes for everybody. Having a woman who only got an 800 on an SAT be admitted in favor over somebody who's, say, Asian, who killed it, but we give it to the woman because, hey, we got to get that affirmative action in there. We need more women, but we can't let this Asian guy get in. It's bullshit. All right, it's cheating everybody. It's cheating the Asian guy who busted his ass and got that 1200 passing score that would have got him into the college, and it's absolutely degrading to the woman who can't keep up and ends up failing out. Interestingly enough, this exact topic was covered in a different book that I read by Malcolm Gladwell, and I don't remember which one of his books it was in, but I do remember reading it because I thought, oh, this is just like that. Gladwell, in his book, points out that sometimes it is far better to be a big fish in a small pond than a little fish in a big pond. And that was literally his metaphor. In his story, Gladwell was also looking at and explaining failing out of school. I mean, even how if you are accepted at Harvard, you might be better off going to a state university. All right, you're still going to get the education. It's still going to do you a huge amount of good. You will still be able to get those great jobs, but not if you fail out of university because you bit off more than you could chew. All right. Gladwell is not nearly as controversial to the left as Williams is, so I'm sure his metaphor went over way better than the absolute straight shooting that Williams does in his book. Environment and health. Williams really dislikes the EPA and the do-gooders who insist on doing everything for your health and your benefit. Several of the essays in this section address just how wrong predictions about environmental catastrophes have been, pointing out that natural catastrophes, like, say, a volcanic explosion, have done way more harm to the environment than humanity has done. And yes, he cites sources. I'm not going to go through and find them, but they're in there. He points out where he's getting his information from. And basically that good ideas don't require force. And again, government is force. That's all they can do is force you to do what they say. He points out that the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, like all fraudulent agencies, has produced its share of fraudulent reports. Fraudulent reports like the book I read last year, Pandora's Lab, when good science goes bad or something like that. Pandora's Lab was the name of the book. The subtitle I'm drawing blank on, but that particular book talks about the catastrophe that was Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, and how despite a 7,000-page document presented to Congress saying, hey, every single thing she put in this book is bullshit and here's why. My lipstick is smudging. Every single thing in this book is bullshit and here's why. The media got involved, and Congress, instead of saying, no, every single thing in this book is bullshit and here's why, said, okay, well, we'll create the EPA, and gave the EPA the ability to go through and destroy lives based on some bullshit. Numbers and figures and panic that doesn't need to exist. But we give these idiots voice. The media gives them voice, and we listen to them. And having caved to media pressure to ban indoor smoking, there has been a new movement in the 90s, and I do remember hearing this recently. And I even remember it from the 90s, so I wasn't completely unaware of everything in the 90s. Mostly was, but about people wanting to ban people from wearing perfume. And we gave them permission to ban shit with saying, hey, you can't smoke indoors. Let's just give them permission to ban the wearing of perfume now. And I've never really cared what people do. If you want to smoke, fine. I don't want smoking in my house because my walls, I'm painting my walls. I don't want them to be brown from cigarette smoke. But, I've only been super sensitive to perfume exactly one time in my life, dealing with a migraine at work. I went home and I slept for 18 hours and I was fine the next day. Realistically, your sense of smell is your weakest sense. Breathe deeply a few times and you won't even notice it anymore. Except for tequila. I can smell that shit for days. International. In this section, he tackles tariffs and how enforcing tariffs actually harms us. Typically, tariffs, when enforced, are used to line the pockets of someone who has, in turn, lined the pockets of a Congress critter who is enforcing the tariffs. The example he tends to point to are sugar tariffs. Congress would raise taxes on imported sugar, making sugar here expensive to purchase. So in order to combat that, domestic companies turn to corn syrup as a sweetener instead of sugar. This, incidentally, makes corn more expensive for us to purchase as well, because now the corn producers have a market. They've got us, the average consumer, who just wants to buy corn to go with our steaks, and they have the corn syrup producers who can buy a shit ton more of it. So corn for us goes up too. He also in this section tackles corporate welfare. I'm not sure if this is still the case, but in the mid-1990s, Congress used to, I'm sure they still do, they don't change anything. They never edit the budget unless it's to add more things. They never remove things from the budget. But in the mid-1990s, Congress used to give money to corporations like McDonald's. Yeah. Who thought McDonald's needed corporate welfare? Well, what they would do, they would give money to McDonald's so McDonald's could advertise overseas. Yep. So fast food's not only bad for your health, it's bad for your pocketbook. I know, you think it's cheap, right? It's cheaper to eat at McDonald's than it is to eat healthy at the store. Not when they're taking your money in taxes and giving it to McDonald's to benefit their overseas operations. The fuck do I care if McDonald's can advertise in China? Why do I care? If McDonald's can't afford it on their own, they have no business advertising in China. Just saying. I know, you're thinking, no, I pay the taxes to McDonald's. McDonald's uses that money. No. What happens is your income taxes, those taxes that you have to file every year on April 15th, they use that to give McDonald's money. So glad that McDonald's bottom line was improved off of my tax dollars. I'm just thrilled with that one. Law and society. Throughout the book, Williams has been highlighting the catastrophe that inevitably follows liberal policy. In this section, he gets real specific. The bulk of bad legal policy seems to be the result of leftist propaganda, who then adamantly refuse to acknowledge their complicity in the fallout that inevitably happens. He especially targets the quote-unquote war on poverty. I'd like to congratulate poverty for winning the war on poverty. Quote, between 1965 and 1994, poverty programs have cost taxpayers $5.4 trillion in inflation-adjusted dollars. It's a lot of money. But did poor people get all of that money? What do you think? Well, as Williams would say, if you said no, go to the head of the class. No, they did not. A huge chunk of that money went to hiring more government workers to administer the policies that are failing. And this is true of most laws. The bulk of the money that's confiscated from we the people in the form of our taxes, that incredibly Byzantine code that we all have to file by April 15th on, is confiscated from us and used to support these government programs that are not actually allowed under Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution. I'm going to do I have a book on the Constitution. I'll probably do that one in September, closer to Constitution Day. I don't think I have September planned yet. I had it planned this time last year, but not yet. Most of our tax dollars goes to pay the deep state. The deep state is those non-elected bureaucrats who wreck our lives by enforcing their own wish list of what's good for us, rather than letting we, the people, decide for ourselves how we want to live our lives. Potpourri. The last section are just kind of a few one-off articles that don't necessarily fit into any one of the above categories. Or rather, they could, but for reasons of his own, Williams pulled them out to be in his final thoughts section of the book, basically. In this section, he tackles things like rights versus wishes, pointing out that rights are something everyone has, like free speech. You have the right to say what you want to say. Okay? Wishes are something you can only obtain by forcing someone else into slavery, like healthcare. Seriously, he uses healthcare as the example in here. If you have the right to healthcare, then the doctor must see you, essentially forcing a doctor into slavery over your demands for healthcare. You don't have the right to healthcare. You have the right to free speech. You can voice your opinion about how much it sucks that your health sucks. Maybe you should go to the gym. That's what I'm doing. Badly. I'm still panting for breath when I climb up the stairs, but I at least go. I make the attempt. He tackles quote-unquote crazy money, pointing out that there are families who literally are empowered to be lazy and act crazy just to get welfare checks. We don't expect them to do anything more. Essentially, we treat them like animals. No joke. He has a chapter in there on animal compassion versus human compassion, and basically we treat people who are poor like they're animals to be taken care of, rather than teaching them how to take care of themselves. As Williams points out, the only way to get off the crazy train is to be willing to watch people suffer for their own bad decisions. And we just don't do that. All right? The people who are unwilling to watch it, most of us, do the logical thing, which is to donate our own money. It's that voluntarism in action, right? We'll donate our own money. We'll donate goods and services. We'll go and work at a soup kitchen, for example. Those are things you can do if you yourself are opposed to watching people suffer. That's what most logical people do. And then there are the do-gooders who are going to torture us for their own mental well-being, all right? Because they do it with, what's that C.S. Lewis quote? But the example that Williams gives is if you provide somebody with food for a week on Sunday, okay? So say you're doing like that Meals and Wheels thing, right? And you're going to do the shopping for somebody and you're going to bring them food on Sunday, all right? And you bring them a full week's of groceries, and by Wednesday, they've eaten all of it. It's gone. They're out of food. Wednesday, they call you and say, hey, shit, I'm out of food. I know you brought me food for a week, but I went through all of it. If you then bring them another delivery on Thursday, they're never going to learn, right? They're just going to be like, hey, the Meals on Wheels guy is coming again. I'm going to just take advantage of that. Make them go hungry until the following Sunday. I mean, hell, they can get water from the tap. You can live without food. You can't live without water. They'll be hungry, it'll suck, but they're going to learn some self-restraint if they got to go Thursday, Friday, and Saturday with no food. Or they'll get off their ass and go get a fucking job. He tackles the war on drugs. He does. He mentions it. I'd like to congratulate drugs for winning the war on drugs. He doesn't say that, but, I mean, it was only, 10 years in at that point? Nah, maybe it was. When did the war on drugs start? I think it was a Reagan era policy, which make it about 10 years old. So, yeah. Yeah, the war on drugs won even as early as 1997. Should I stop drinking on an empty stomach? Maybe I should eat before I do these recordings. As always, Williams' writing is insightful. He's always insightful. It gives you food for thought. I did not agree with every single thing he said. I agreed with a lot of what he said because I could see his point, and he's always passionate about what he's writing about. Didn't agree with everything. The one that specifically stands out makes me go, but they were right. I don't remember if it was in the government section or the one on healthcare. It could have been either one, honestly, because the topic under discussion was he was decrying the liberal agenda and complaining about how some nurses in, I think it was San Francisco, were written up for wearing masks and gloves while treating AIDS patients because, quote, liberals want us all to believe AIDS is not transmissible through casual contact. I mean, they were right. You can't catch AIDS through casual contact, so they were right. I mean, seriously, though, like, by accident, they were bound to get something right. can't be wrong all the time. Of course I like this book. I like this book. I like Walter E. Williams. I like anybody who can articulate their thoughts well, which is not always me. I'm going to be fair, the alcohol probably doesn't help with the not articulating it well. Some of this stuff is heady topics. It needs alcohol to get through. But most importantly, in today's cancel culture climate, he's providing perspective. Even though it's 25 years old at this point, that perspective remains opposed to what's touted in the media. The media sucks, man. They lie. There's a reason that Joe Rogan is so wildly popular, even with his apology, which I haven't seen yet because I was so disappointed. All right, I'm going off topic here. My point being, I guess, though, if you are the same person today as you were a decade ago, you need to go out and live your life. You need to go out and talk to people from a different spectrum. Somebody who thinks differently from you. Damn it, I just realized I need to unblock some people on Facebook because my Facebook is turning into an echo chamber. Anyways, that was off topic and a rant. He's providing perspective, even one that's 25 years old, that remains opposed to what's touted in the media, and it's still highly relevant. That's what's so important. It is still highly relevant to today. Especially given that most of these topics, education, white privilege, gender, race, this is all still ongoing. They're all still canards that are being touted in today's media. And I can but hope that sometime in the future, some enterprising publisher will reach out to his daughter and say, hey, we'd like to publish a complete work of your father's weekly essays. And I hope she says yes. I truly do, because his wisdom, it's sad that he died, but again, he was like 84. Everybody dies. Death is a part of life. We should really all get used to that fact. It's not going to change anytime soon. But it's sad that his wisdom is gone, because it's wisdom that we desperately need. That's it for this week. I'm sorry I got a little maudlin there at the end. Thank you all for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. I will see you guys next week, where we're going to tackle Beaten Black and Blue by the Officer Tatum. I will see you guys next week. Bye.